Okay, guys, in this lesson, we're going to talk about eating disorders. So generally speaking, an eating disorder is any condition of abnormal or disordered eating habits that ultimately affect a person's physical or mental health. So specifically, we're going to cover anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Let's go through each one of these. Clients with anorexia nervosa typically eat very little, if anything. They may even only consume water. So we often find that they are preoccupied with food, almost obsessed with food. They have a distorted body image and a low self-esteem. This is the key. This is where a lot of this comes from. And, they don't see what we see when we look at them. They see themselves as being overweight or not good enough, even when the world can see that they are actually skin and bones. They tend to be absolutely terrified of gaining weight, and they might even have phobias of certain foods. Now, physiologically, we're going to see a decrease in their metabolism because they are not eating. So we'll see this low heart rate, low blood pressure, low temperature, and then they are going to develop something called lanugo. Lanugo is a fine layer of hair that develops all over the body. It's almost like the body's trying desperately to insulate itself because they've lost that layer of fat and their temperature is so low. Now, one of the most significant complications of anorexia nervosa is the electrolyte disturbances. You can imagine if you aren't consuming any nutrients and you aren't drinking enough water or only drinking water, that your electrolytes are going to be significantly out of whack. So this can absolutely be life-threatening, especially because we know the impact of, let's say, potassium abnormalities on the heart, right? So our cardiac system is very stressed by electrolyte disturbances. And we're also going to see hormonal imbalances. Many of these female clients will stop getting their period. And then also because of both of these things put together, the hormonal changes and the electrolyte disturbances, we can see bone degeneration that is similar to osteoporosis. Now, keep in mind, all of this has more to do with altered thought processes than just, physical symptoms. And then remember that it affects, males and females alike, okay? This is not just a female disease. So bulimia nervosa is a little different. They'll have the same issues with preoccupation with food, distorted body image, low self-esteem, fear of gaining weight, phobias of certain foods. They'll even have some of the same physical findings in terms of, a low heart rate, low blood pressure. But the big difference here is they actually do eat. They will go through these cycles of binging and purging. So they'll eat a ton of food, even to the point of being super uncomfortable, and then they'll purge, which means doing something to get it out of their system. So most commonly, this involves vomiting. It could also be diuretics, enemas, laxatives, things to speed up their metabolism to burn it off faster, like amphetamines or excessive exercise. And usually there's just a lot of guilt associated with these binging and purging cycles. We see that their moods tend to be very labile, which means they kind of swing pretty easily. And then during these cycles of binging and purging, they may tend to feel helpless to stop it. And it creates this significant emotional cycle as well. They may also have electrolyte disturbances depending on the severity of their purging and, how much gets absorbed. But the biggest complication for bulimia is going to be the dental issues. They'll have erosion of their tooth enamel because of the stomach acid when they vomit so much. So we may start to see their teeth yellow and possibly even start to decay over time. So the last one we'll review quickly is binge eating disorder, which used to be called compulsive overeating. They'll have significant binging episodes without purging. They will eat super fast, or they'll eat until they are uncomfortably, almost painfully full, or they'll even eat when they're not hungry at all. They may even begin to eat alone, or I've seen people eat in their car because they're ashamed to let people see how much they're eating. I even heard a patient talk about ordering an extra drink in the drive-thru so they wouldn't think it was all for her. And it's really common for this binge eating to be a coping mechanism or triggered by emotions. And that's not just negative emotions, that's good and bad emotions. If they're super happy, they eat. If they're excited, they eat. And then, of course, if they're sad or frustrated. Again, these clients are going to feel helpless to stop. Okay. Now, of course, the most significant complication would be obesity and everything that comes along with it. But not everyone with binge eating disorder will be overweight, and not everyone who is overweight has binge eating disorder. Remember, there's this underlying, psychological pathology here that distorts their thinking about food. This is a thought process issue. So, number one priority for any of these clients is to make sure that they are stable medically. So this may mean fluid and electrolyte replacement. This might mean, doing an EKG to evaluate for arrhythmias, etc. If they aren't medically stable, then nothing else we do will matter. From there, we're sure to do a self-harm assessment. Remember that they have a distorted self-image, so they may consider harming themselves. We also want to establish rapport. Remember that there's a lot of fear and anxiety involved, so we want them to be able to feel safe with us. And then we help them to identify their feelings and identify their triggers. Now, the big thing here is we want to manage their expectations, okay? We want to make sure that they know the plan. How much and how often are we going to ask them to eat? Also, how often are they going to be weighed, and what does the weigh-in process look like? Even the idea of eating or stepping on a scale can elicit some serious anxiety, so it's important that we give them the plan so that they can be emotionally prepared. Now, of course, we want to involve the support system if appropriate. It is possible in many of these cases that the family is one of their triggers. So make sure you're really evaluating, the big picture here and doing what's right for your client. So top nursing priority concepts for a client with an eating disorder, of course, nutrition, making sure they're getting the right amount of good nutrition, fluid and electrolyte balance to prevent any serious complications like arrhythmias, and coping. The thought processes and emotions are deep here and they need to be addressed. So remember that these conditions involve disordered, abnormal eating habits that affect the person's health. The three types that we talked about are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Remember to address their emotions, establish rapport, validate their feelings, identify those triggers. We also want to manage their expectations, set small goals, talk about the routine, and then evolve the support system if it's appropriate. And as always, 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 safety first. Stabilize the patient medically before addressing the underlying emotions, and always do a self-harm assessment. Okay, guys, so that's it for eating disorders. Make sure you check out all of the resources attached to this lesson, including the patient story. Now go out and be your best self today. Happy nursing.